Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while since I've uploaded, but we're back at it. In this video, I'm going to be making a table for some bonsai trees I got back in November. Up until now, they've been sitting on my desk at work and I really wanted something a little bit nicer to set them on, so I designed this guy. I found some really nice quarter sawn white oak for the field of this table that you see me cutting down here, and this weird rift spaghetti looking white oak figure as well. I don't know what you really want to call that, but this is it. In order to pay homage to the Japanese heritage that is inherent in bonsai, I'm drawing some inspiration from Japanese architecture, specifically the pagoda style roofs seen across a lot of their buildings. And to do that, the breadboard ends of this table are going to be tilted up to achieve that look. And you'll see more of that later, but I'm going to start off by jointing and planing these boards down to thickness, as well as ripping down some 8/4 stock for legs. Now, I've had people ask why it is that you need a jointer, and this is exactly why. Here I am jointing a piece that will become the top, and when I show it off in the light, you can see where the cutter head has made contact with the board and where it hasn't. And while yes, you can use a planer sled to achieve the same thing by shimming and hot gluing, or I've even seen people make super intricate sleds out of like purple heart and other exotics to flatten boards on a planer, I'd much rather just use this machine that's dedicated to the one act of flattening than have to go through the headache of making a sled every single time. Don't get me wrong, I mean, I've been in the position where I could only have one, and if I had to choose, it would definitely be the planer, but I do not miss the days of shimming and running stuff through the planer to get flat and square work pieces. Now you can see why you need the planer, because here the pencil marks show you where the piece is still low versus where it's already made contact with the cutter head. So I'm going to run it through a few more times, and I'm actually going to run the field through a couple times more than the breadboard ends, because the breadboard ends are going to be just a little proud to hide any discrepancies that there might be. I'm also going to rip this down at the table saw to final dimension, but first I'm going to use a ruler to check that that sapwood line in there is somewhat parallel to the edge of the board. And if it wasn't, I could run it over with a hand plane or maybe a few partial passes with the jointer to correct that. It's also time for jig number 1 of this build to make an appearance, and that's going to be made to hold the breadboard ends at about 7 degrees while I route the female end of the sliding dovetail. So I'll rip this piece of plywood down to that angle, and I'll keep that angle the same while I rip down the edge of the breadboard end. This will keep the edge of the breadboard parallel to the router tabletop, effectively putting these at a 7-degree angle to give me that pagoda look that I'm after.
He moves! Right there! Wait! Right there!
Next, I'll cut these top pieces down to their final dimension on the table saw, and I'm going to use the shooting board to make sure these are the exact same length and perfectly square. The miter gauge does a pretty good job, but I find that the shooting board does that job just a little bit better. I'll go into a little bit more detail here in a bit about how I use the shooting board and its function, but first I'll cut the breadboard ends to their final dimension. I let these pieces sit for a few days, and the lumber for the tops did move a little, as you can see by the rocking here. I didn't want to rejoint and plane these boards again, so I made this, jig number 2. It basically acts as a platen to flatten these boards against while I run them through the router table to give them the male end of the sliding dovetail. I did a test piece to see how they fit, and it's pretty good, but you see here I've got some gnarly tear out, so in an effort to curb as much of that as possible, I set my marking gauge to the same height as the shoulder depth of my test piece. And marking around the top pieces, this severs the fibers and prevents that tear out from making its way up that workpiece where it would be visible. I can then clamp these down in the jig and run them through, and as you can see in just a second, I've got nice crisp shoulder lines with no tear out. This is probably one of my top 5 favorite tools in the shop, my Emmert Pattern Maker's Vise. It's so convenient to use because not only does it clamp my work, but I can rotate it up and down, left to right, as well as hold tapered parts and put them at all kinds of different angles to make working on stuff much more comfortable, which makes shaping and sanding these curved edges on these spreadboard ends that much easier. I will say they're not cheap, but if you can find one, definitely snag it. It's worth every penny if you ask me. Also, here's a pro tip I learned from a furniture maker I work with. Glue some sandpaper to a thin piece of MDF, I've got 1/4 inch here, and use it as a sanding platen. It'll help you maintain a more consistent radius on curved parts, and only sand the high spots and prevent lumpiness from creeping into your projects. Or don't. I don't care. I told you guys earlier that I would elaborate more on the shooting board and how it works. So what I've done is I've taken my reference edge and placed it away from the fence. And I'm angling the tail away from the fence as well, and I'm going to cut a small chamfer on my reference edge. And this will prevent any fibers from blowing out on the back side of the cut, similar to how I severed the fibers on the shoulder of the sliding dovetail. And I can see that I've got a decent amount of material to remove, but by watching the gap near the back of the cut disappear, I can tell when I'm nearly all the way through. Now I'm taking a pretty light cut here, maybe 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch at a time, so I can be pretty accurate with my final length of the workpiece. It's also important that you use the same piece to reference all of your pieces that need to be the same length. For example, you would use piece A to reference against piece B to make sure they are the same length, and then also use piece A to reference against piece C, and piece A to reference against piece D. That way you could tell that they're all the same length. I know it might sound obvious, but I've made that error before, and that compounding error can lead to some seriously gappy joints somewhere down the road. I don't know what it is about sliding dovetails, but I love them. They're probably my favorite joint. Earlier, it was really important that all of those pieces are the same length, and that's because those are the stretchers in what I'm calling a secondary stretcher, that little guy underneath. If either of those were either out of square or of unequal length, it would have put those dovetail slots in different spots, and it wouldn't really have affected the function of the table because none of these pieces really interact with each other, but my ADHD couldn't handle them not being in the same place. And by using the leg of the table as kind of a fence, I can guarantee that these slots are all going to be in the same spot on both faces because all of the stretchers are the same. These slots are going to house some arched brackets that will support the tabletop and give it this floating look. I could have used dominoes to do this, but the dovetail is just such a cool joint, I had to use it again. This is probably one of my favorite builds I've done in the last 5 years. It's something just for me that builds on another hobby that I'm starting to get into more. I think that the linear grain of this rift white oak lends itself really well to the design, making this table seem taller than it really is, and the sapwood in the top is also complemented by the sapwood in the front and rear panel. I purposely didn't set any deadlines for this build, simply because I knew that if I did, that unnecessary stress would lead me to make some choices that I really didn't want to make, that ultimately might have led to this table not being what I wanted it to be. But I'm incredibly happy with this one. I hope you guys like it also. If you take a look at the background, you'll see that Japanese-inspired lamp I made a few years ago. If you haven't seen that video, go give it a look, and as always, thanks for watching.